My name's Hannah. I'm a doctor and English teacher from England. In today's video, I would like to talk about exam technique for the Occupational English Test, Reading Part A. This is a video that lots of people have requested that I make, and Part A is the part of the reading that a lot of people really struggle with because it's hard. You have to do a lot of reading and answer a lot of questions in a really short space of time. Talking through exam technique, I'll essentially be talking through the way I would manage my time in the OET exam and how to maximize efficiency. Now, it goes without saying, it's really important in order to get good marks in the OET reading that you work on your general English reading and reading of healthcare-related texts. Exam technique is important and it can help improve your marks. However, it can only ever help to some extent. Therefore, I really recommend that you spend a lot of your preparation time on improving your vocabulary, doing lots and lots of reading, and practicing the general English reading skills of skimming and scanning. If you haven't seen it already, check out my video up here somewhere talking about my general tips for preparing for OET reading, and check out the link in the description for a page on my website with lots and lots of free reading materials that you can use to practice. However, I'll now go straight in to talking about the OET reading Part A and how to manage your time in the exam to maximize your marks. So, as a recap, the exam structure is 15 minutes where you'll be given 4 short texts, of which one will be a table or a flowchart of some sort, and 20 questions which require answers in the short answer format, so one letter or one word mostly. The reading Part A really tests 2 main skills, skimming and scanning. So skimming means reading very, very quickly through texts to get a general sense of the meaning of what the text is all about. Scanning, on the other hand, is still reading quickly, but it's looking for key information that you can then pause your scanning and look at that key information. This is what I recommend you do with your first 2 minutes of the reading Part A. I would skim each text, assigning an average of 30 seconds for each text. While you're skimming through and reading it as fast as possible, you should assign a heading to each text. So what is the main thing that text A is getting across? Is it instructions for how to do something? Is it talking about a specific piece of equipment? Is it discussing medications? You can either write that heading down or just make a mental note of it. While you're skimming, to help you focus, I find it helpful to underline key words, particularly if they're buried in a chunk of text. Now, you might be saying that it's absolutely impossible to read so much information in just 2 minutes, and it is difficult, and this is one of the areas that you'll need to practice a lot. However, if you can manage to read and get a general sense of what all 4 texts are saying in that 2 minutes, that is where you can make the rest of the exam so much easier and really maximize your marks. Okay, so the next 2 minutes, I would do questions 1 to 7. This is always a matching exercise where it asks you which text will have which piece of information. It's important to read the question carefully. Again, you can underline keywords in the question, but once you've understood the question, you should already know the answer from your skimming exercise. So all you should need to do is a very quick confirmation that, yes, based on the heading that I've remembered or written down, this piece of information belongs to this text. So just quickly look it up, and if you're not sure, if you're like, I have no idea which text this is, I don't remember this particular thing being mentioned, just guess. You've got a 25% chance of getting it right, just from probability, and then put a little pencil mark next to the question, so if you have time later, you can come back to it. However, do not spend more than the 2 minutes on questions 1 to 7. And you can view it as a bit of a warm-up exercise. By doing this, you're helping reinforce which areas of the text contain which information, which you can then use for the subsequent parts of the test. So your next 7 to 10 minutes, I would dedicate to answering questions 8 to 20. These are simple short answer questions where they're looking for a keyword that you can pick out of the texts. I would dedicate 30 seconds and absolute maximum 1 minute per question. The way to answer these is you should know, based on having already read the text, which area of the text it's likely to come from. So quickly go to there, scan through what you can see until you can see the answer to your question, and then write that down. Again, if you're not sure, make an educated guess if you can. If you have no idea, then just mark the question, leave it blank, and move on. The way to really lose a huge amount of marks in the reading part A is to get caught up on one question you don't know the answer to, and then not have time to answer maybe 5 questions that you would easily be able to answer. So depending on how long you've spent on the previous section, you'll have either 1 minute or 4 minutes at the end. And try and go back to those questions that you've marked as being unsure and check them. You've spent the last 10 to 15 minutes going through all of the text to answer the questions, so you'll know them better than when you first opened your question paper. Therefore, you might find that a question that you previously didn't know the answer to, you now think, oh, okay, I think it's likely to be this. If you have time, you can then go back and check your other answers. Starting for questions 1 to 7, check, yes, this is definitely correct, because again, you know the text more, you might find that you've made some mistakes. However, really make sure you're not caught out by the clock. Once the 15 minutes is up, they're going to tell you to put your pencils down, and you do have to stop at that exact moment. So make sure that you're keeping an eye on the clock and you don't rub out an answer that might have been right in order to correct it and then end up not being able to write anything, because a blank answer is always going to get you 0 marks. So just watch out for that. Now what I'd like to do is show you with a worked example how I would make these timings work. I'm going to use Reading Sample 1, available for free on the OET website. If you haven't already done this test and used this material, I recommend that you do it first on your own so I don't spoil a potential sample paper for you. So I'm going to go to the text and I'm going to try and read these as quickly as I can. Clearly I can't read out loud as quickly as I would skimming in my head, and it's not a useful use of your time to watch me sit and read in silence for 2 minutes. But I'll just talk through a few things. So text A I can see is already much shorter than text B, so I should be able to read it very, very quickly. And I would make a mental note in my head that text A is about definitions. It's talking about how to define a fracture versus a dislocation versus a sprain. Then I come to text B. I see this is a really long one, so I might actually skim over some of these little sub-bullet points, but I'll make sure I read the main headings. So I've got management, lots of instructions, clinical assessment, and then management. Coming down to text C, I can see that this is my table, or I was expecting one of these. I also want to make sure I don't miss things around the outside of the table. So I can see here there's talking about different types of health worker, of who can give this drug. I can see that the whole table is all about morphine, but talking about different routes, different doses, and the duration. And again, I'm not going to ignore this little bit underneath the table that says what to do with patients over 70, talking about providing information about side effects, and talking about respiratory depression. Finally, text D, I'm going to look through and I can see this is a technique for a plaster back slab. And again, it's all instructions. So in terms of my headings, I'm going to be giving definition, instructions for management and assessment of a simple fracture, everything about morphine, and text D is about instructions specifically for plaster back slab. Okay, so that should have taken me 2 minutes maximum, and I'll then go into my question paper, carefully read each question. So procedures for delivering pain relief. So just from the top of my head, it's not going to be A because that's my definition, and it's not going to be D because D is only one procedure, the back slab. So it's either going to be B or C. I'm going to quickly go and check. And in B, I know it's going to come under the management for pain relief because I've already read this in my 2 minutes. And I can see it just talks about administrating analgesia. It doesn't talk about very many other things. And C talks all about morphine, and it does talk about different routes of administration. So this is a bit ambiguous, but I would go with C. Procedure to follow when splinting a fractured limb. Well, we know that text D is all about backslab. That's a way we can splint, so that's D. What to record when assessing a patient? Well, assessment only came up in text B, so that's B. The terms used to describe different types of fractures, well, that's all in our definition, so I'm fairly confident that's going to be text A. Practitioners who administer analgesia. Now remember when we looked at text C, it had the little bit at the top that wasn't in the table about who can give the morphine, which is a type of analgesia, so I'm going to go with C. What to look for when checking an injury. So again, checking is all about assessment. That's going to be in text B. How fractures can be caused. That's looking more at general fracture stuff. I think that's going to be A, but I'm going to go and check. Okay, often occur following direct or indirect injury. And here's some mechanisms. So that's definitely going to be text A. So you can see I hardly needed to go back to the texts, only in that first question. And if I found I still wasn't sure, I would have just guessed B or C and moved on. So then coming to questions 8 to 14, I'm not going to go through each of these. I think it's more helpful for you to do it yourself. But just going through the first couple, what should be used to elevate a patient's fractured leg? So first off, I need to think, which text am I going to start scanning in? This is all about what to do with a fracture. So I think this is going to be text B. And it's about management. So is it going to be in the immediate management at the front? Scanning through the immediate management. No, it's hemorrhage, immobilize, pain relief. It's not going to be in assessment, so I'm not going to read any of this. And then management, we've got splinting, elevate. There we go. So I've scanned for the word elevate. And there it says a sling for arm injuries, a pillow for leg injuries. Right, this is talking about a leg. So my answer will be a pillow. And again, just one more question to show you the technique. What is the maximum dose of morphine per kilo of a patient's weight that can be given using the intramuscular route? So this is definitely going to be text C. That's all about morphine. And we're looking at intramuscular. So I come to this IM and the recommended dosage, 0.1 to 0.2 milligram per kilogram. So that's a range. And this is the maximum dose per kilo. So per kilo maximum is 0.2. And that's how I would continue for all of these, trying to go as quickly as possible. Again, if I get caught and I think, oh God, I don't know where to start with this question, I can't remember which text it's going to come into, just put a little dot next to the question and just leave it blank. If you're not sure and you can do an educated guess, so for example, this one, what should be used to treat a patient who suffers respiratory depression? You might already know this. You know, if you're a doctor or a nurse who works a lot with respiratory patients or in an emergency department, you know that naloxone is what you use to treat respiratory depression. So even if you can't find it in the text, that's an educated guess. But again, don't worry if you don't know an answer. Just mark it and move on. And then once you've finished, if you do have time left, go right the way back to the start and start looking at any questions that you've marked. And especially 1 to 7, you should make sure you get full marks in 1 to 7, because by saving yourself a little bit of time and coming back at the end, you will know these texts well enough to know for sure which text goes with which piece of information. And then again, if you have time, go to any marked questions down here. And if you still have time, if you've been really super speedy, you can start again going back to the beginning, checking your 1 to 7 and then checking these answers. Remembering to keep an eye on the clock, and once you've only got 5 seconds to go, don't rub anything out. Just be ready to put your pencil down. So that finishes my advice on how to approach reading part A of the OET. If you enjoyed that video, let me know in the comments. As always, if you have any questions, put them in the comments. I'm always happy to respond, and I'm always open to suggestions for new videos. That's why I made this one, because lots of people were asking me about how do I do reading part A. If you liked this video, hit subscribe, check out my other videos that are popping up around here, and I'll see you next time. Bye!